the pond and was fenced off. There's also a small narrow road just over the train tracks leading up to a forestry area for tree planting after an area is logged off. Anyway, as I was walking back to the house away from the pond area, I heard what sounded like someone jumping off of something onto the road with 2 feet. I quickly looked and didn't see anything. I stood there for a moment looking. I still didn't see anything. The atmosphere changed from calm and peaceful to apprehension. To the right, and right through our friend's property on the left, past the pond. When people who've encountered this creature say it was a tank, bulldozer, or a freight train at high speed crashing through the brush, that's exactly what it was. When I saw it bolt and run the 300 to 450 feet to some pine trees, I knew, but I didn't want to accept the reality of what I saw. You know the 5 words that people say after they've seen something so far out there? I know what I saw. It stopped just before the pond line, figuring it was far enough away to stay put in the designated area whilst the fellas went to get the tractor and trailer for us to load the wood. As I enjoyed the autumn sunshine afternoon warmth, I suddenly heard a very loud tree knock close by me. I picked up a baseball bat-sized branch nearby and proceeded to swing a Teddy Williams at a tree in front of me. It was a very loud clunk noise when I connected, and the end of the branch snapped off 4 inches. It rattled my hands pretty good. Just then, without any sort of plan, I saw that there was a full out of a large diameter tree, or a fireball gas, an eclipse, or a mass hallucination brought on by mushrooms in the water supply. I believe that the area where I was near, Muskogee, Ravenna, and Ludington, in a large forested area that leads along the western coastal area of Michigan, all the way up to the Upper Peninsula. It's not very populated in these areas for sure, or it wasn't back in the woods behind it, so I decided to walk a bit and find a spot to set up my stuff and make my dinner. So I walked for about maybe 30 to 40 minutes and found a little clearing with a couple fallen trees and enough of an opening to safely have a fire. One side note, I carry an old Japanese sword everywhere I went back then. It goes on for a few minutes, I guess. I'm not looking at a watch. Eventually, I hear something run off and something walking towards me, breathing heavy and moving slow. I can see a bit with the fire, and I do have a flashlight, but it doesn't cross my mind to use it. But it stops just out of the reach of the firelight. I can see something big standing next to a tree. I can't see it too clearly, but can make out the outline of its shape. And I can see hair hanging down, because it reaches out and puts its hand on a tree, to stand itself up. That is its right arm, beginning at the end of May. We got to the end of the road, hiked in about 3 miles, then up the side of the mountain about a quarter of a mile. We were picking mushrooms, and I started smelling this most pungent, awful, rotten smell. I started looking around for an explanation. Then we heard rocks being hit together. Not a rock on the ground. We came across a thicket we couldn't get through, so we would have to walk around it. Once we turned, and then from behind us, we heard a deep voice say, "Boom, boom." My friend said, "What did you say?" I said, "I didn't say anything." I believe we were in between a mother and a child, and that's a scary place to be. I didn't know if that would be enough for an 11-mile round-trip hike, but I'm very slightly built, and I didn't think I could manage more than that. Right from the start, the trail was tough going, and after the first mile, one guy said he just couldn't go any further and was going to turn back. The rest of us could hardly blame him, as he had broken a leg about 6 months ago and gotten out of his walking boot only 4 weeks ago. Another hiker said he'd go back down with him. Up ahead of us was this huge, shaggy bear. It was about a half-mile away and headed in our direction. It was walking upright on its hind legs and growling. As the beast got a little closer, we knew it couldn't be a bear. It didn't have any fur on its face, and the orangish-brown hair on its body was much longer than most of my superiors came to me to share stories and concerns, or as a sounding board, because I always try and see all sides of an argument, and usually can work towards a win-win conclusion. I'm a very rational person, so why do I have 3 memories while out in the bush that I cannot explain, and why do they haunt me to this day? What I could see was a very bright spot of light on a bush. It was very unsettling, as there was heavy cloud cover. After what seemed to be an hour, but probably only minutes, trying to face my fear, I heard a heavy thump to my right. I looked over towards the sound, but could see nothing. I looked back again to where the energy was coming from. The spotted light had moved. I heard a second thump to my right again, but much closer this time. Looking over, I saw a large bowling ball-sized rock rolling to a stop in the grass. Now, that was tangible evidence that something was not okay. I climb up to get away from there quick, because bears are really scary when they've got cubs, when the thing stood up on hind legs and was just staring at me. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen in place. My feet wouldn't move, and I was just standing there paralyzed, when it kind of snorted and let out a growl, and it turned. I realized my mistake immediately. That mountain was suddenly off limits to me. Not long after that, we had moved. I live in southeastern Kansas at Toronto Lake. We have rolling hills and thick black oak forests, with great white-tailed deer and turkey hunting. In the summer of 2005, it was around 10 p.m., and I was sitting in my living room reading. When it was real, because I've had many encounters with these things. My friend is now freaked out. I was hunting with my Walker Hound one night, and my dogs were on a scent, so I sat down on a log to wait and hear which way they were going. All of a sudden, I heard a branch break, and it was my dogs laying behind me, shaking. I thought, what the heck? My dogs would fight a bear. Then I heard voices. I'm 5 miles from the nearest house on a moonlit night at 2 a.m. I had no flashlight, just sitting there. Next thing, I saw 4 of these things. 2 males, 10 to 12 feet tall, 1 female, 8 foot tall, and the child about 5 to 6 foot tall. The young one was walking in front of the 3 that were walking side by side. They were about 30 feet from me, and the tallest one stopped, lifted his head, and took a big sniff of air. And they all stopped and pinned me. I was so scared I was gonna die that night. The largest one took 1 step towards me, and the next, the female, grabbed its shoulder and spoke in its ear, and said something to it. And even our 2 dogs didn't seem anxious to go after it. They just looked at us and barked. Neither of us could believe what we had seen, so we went over and looked at the tracks the animal left in the wet sand. 1 footprint was very clear, and it was about twice my size 9.5s, and it seemed to have toes much longer than humans. We climbed up on the dune, and the tracks went over the next one and around a large patch of brambles. Judging how fast it had run, we gave up on the show the night before, and talking about how good the next show would be. As we were talking, I heard a strange howling noise, like nothing I've ever heard before. I don't know how to explain it, because the vocalization was coming from the tree line about 200 yards away from where we were. We didn't really think anything of it for the moment, because even though we didn't think that it sounded normal, we were in a different state than where our home was, and thought maybe they had different types of animals around here, like different kinds of mountain lions or bears. So we kept talking, and then we heard it a little closer. It was then we really thought this was weird. We stopped talking and stared at the direction the noise came from, although the light was not good in that direction. After about 5 minutes, we both saw a dark figure standing in the tree line facing our direction. It stood maybe about 8 feet high. You really couldn't tell from where we were when we went there the next morning, as I'll tell you later. In other parts of the Nuclear Pass area. There were few hunters in this area too, because it was so difficult to get into. After sitting and watching a meadow in the area for a while, we decided to split up and go out and see if we could run into something. Jay went one way, Danny another, and Ollie and I yet another. Now, before I go any further, I must tell you what we found when we first arrived in the area. There was a cold campsite where someone had been camped, and they had had horses with them. The evidence was everywhere, and the hay, and the rugged terrain, etc. We said that one day we're going to go back up there and try to find more evidence, or better yet, maybe get some physical evidence, or even a picture of the creature, at least some plaster casts of some of the footprints. I am truly convinced that there are Bigfoot in this area, and my brothers and Danny and I are planning a trip back to the area. Thank you, Dale Westland.
Advanced to be I need that power.
Hey.
And the reliability and product durability, right?
Yes.
And the heavy breathing was next to the window. I don't know if there were more than one of these things breathing heavily by the window, but I could hear the breathing down by one end of the window, by my feet, and then closer by my head. I do remember the tone and volume of the breathing sounding very much the same at both ends, as if someone was moving from one end of the window to the other. I remember listening very intently to this, trying to figure out how many, and thinking whatever it was would have to hop over the trailer hitch to get from one end of the window to the process of opening my own outfit. I must admit, I've always been skeptical about Bigfoot until now. 2 years ago, I was packing clients into the Pike National Forest. Myself and another guide, along with 4 clients, were on our way out and got a late start. With only a few miles to go, we were in total darkness along a trail. My horse stopped without command and got very anxious. I assumed it was another animal, or at worst, a mountain lion. I eagerly tried to get him to move forward, and he would not. I got off my horse and led him up the trail. Coming around a bend in the trail, a creature standing at least 7 foot tall and covered in dark hair crossed the trail not 20 feet in front of me. It walked on 2 legs and was out of sight in 2 or 3 steps. But what amazed me was that it didn't make any noise, and it disappeared into the very steep valley below. Another thing I found disturbing was the faint smell in the air. I hunt and guide hunters for mostly elk, 9 times the size of its hands. They were long and were like half the size of its forearm. For the first time ever, I was truly scared, not of what I saw, but of not ever really seeing anything like this before and having to face a reality. After at least 5 minutes of observing the creature, he turned and walked through the creek towards my camp. He then turned and walked up a ridge and stopped and watched my camp, or at least in that direction.
Tuesday, 12/12/23. Done out here. I gotta go in and do the ad work, but I'm done out here. Came on out here. The journey continues. It's chest day. Hit some incline barbell, hit some incline dumbbells, and did a little back work, some traps, shrugs, some rows. You fucking saw it there. But that's it, man. We're gonna take it inside. Got plenty of other shit I got to do in the house before I can lay down. Before I do go, though, I'll give y'all a little tip. Anybody that's interested. That copper water bottle I told you about that I got. It's good for you. But if you're gonna get one of these, if you're gonna drink out of a copper container, don't drink nothing but water. Don't put nothing else in there. That shit'll make you sick. Trust me. Shit, that shit made me throw up. About a week ago, Just drunk it on down. I had some Kool-Aid or some shit in there. That shit made my stomach. I had to throw that shit up. Anyway, man. Y'all take it easy.